Hello everyone, thank you for joining me again today. We're at the front of the vehicle, and in this video I will be replacing the upper wishbone bushings, both on the right and the left hand side, and I'll also use this opportunity to adjust the caster angle. I hear a little bit of squeaking as I drive and go over bumps, and I believe that squeaking is coming from those upper bushings. That's why I'm replacing them. But also when I did my alignment, the caster angle was right at the edge of the green zone of the allowed interval, and I would like to move it a little bit further, sort of closer to the middle of that green zone. So while I'm changing the bushings, I will also adjust the caster angle. I will put up a couple of pages here on the screen from the factory service manual, which cover this topic, and they sort of explain how the caster angle is controlled and adjusted. Feel free to pause the video, read through the text. In the interest of saving time, I will sort of provide my interpretation or understanding of what the factory service manual explains. Essentially, there are 4 shims which live along this long fulcrum bolt. Those 4 shims are 2 thick ones and 2 thin ones. They are exactly 4, exactly 2 thick, 2 thin, and they cannot, this number or composition cannot be changed, meaning you cannot take away a shim or add in an additional shim or 2. Let's say you cannot have a 5th shim or 6th shim come into this configuration. It can only be those 4 shims. The manual is very explicit about that. Now, the way the caster angle is controlled is by changing the placement of the shims. So right now, this is the right hand side for North America. What I have here are 3 shims. This is at the back of the wishbone. They're kind of hard to see, but there are 3 individual shims here, 2 thick ones and a thin one in the middle. So it's thick, thin, thick. And on the front of the vehicle, there is another thin one, which is very, very hard to see. It's right here. That's the 4th shim. The way the caster angle works is if you take shims from the front and move them to the back, you will be increasing the caster angle. If you do the reverse, where you take shims from the back and move them to the front of the vehicle, the front of the wishbone, then you are reducing the caster angle. By how much? If you do this movement with one thick shim, you will affect the angle by 0.4 degrees. If you do this movement by one thin shim, you would affect the angle by 0.2 degrees. So essentially, right here I have thick, thin, thick, meaning 0.4, 0.2, 0.4, altogether 1 degree. If I take all 3 of these shims and move them from the back of the wishbone to the front, I would be reducing the caster angle by 1 degree. So if the caster angle currently reads, let's say 6 degrees, it would drop down to 5 degrees if I did this movement. In my case, I actually need to increase the caster angle a little bit. So essentially all that I'll be doing is I'll be taking this one thin shim from here and I'll be moving it at the back to join those other 3. So all 4 of my shims, after I'm done, for the right hand side of the vehicle, will be living here at the back of the wishbone. And this should bring my caster angle in almost perfect position. Now we can go ahead with the actual removal. There is really only one nut to remove from here. On both sides, I'm using 15/16 in terms of size. And here, because the liner is closer, I'm using a wrench. Can't really get much else in here in terms of bigger tools. Definitely no power tools. If the liner was out, you may be able to use a power tool, but for me, for now, it's just one bolt. I'll use hand tools and take my time. And you can see the bolt moving, and actually you can even hear the squeaking now. I hope the microphone is picking that up. This is exactly the kind of squeaking I was hearing as I'm driving along. All right, the nut is out. Now you can probably see how the bolt spins more or less freely. I can just spin it with my hand with no tools. This is because I have relieved the pressure from the wishbone, and I do that by, let me just reposition you here, simply using a jack to hold the wheel hub up in place so that the wheel hub does not pull down and essentially provide sort of a pulling force onto that assembly, because if it does, the bolt would be semi-tight and it would be hard to pull it out. When you relieve the pressure, the bolt moves freely and it's much easier to take it all the way out. With the wheel hub supported, not too high and not too low, just at the right position so that the bolt is free to move. You will feel it. When you move the wheel hub up and down, you will feel at what position the bolt is the most loose and sort of free to turn. Once you achieve that, you can start the process of sliding it out. So what I'll do here is I will move it left and right a bit from the head of the bolt, and on this side I'll just press with my hand to get it started. There we go. Relatively easy. Now, oops, a washer fell down. That's a washer. It's not one of the shims. The shims are over here. There's just the end washer here next to the bushing. Over here, this washer would not be able to clear this bracket, but the washer should be, that's interesting, it should be free from the bolt. I'll have to figure this out because the washer is separate, is just currently stuck to the head of the bolt. I'll have to separate them. Let me see if the screwdriver would help. Okay, I'll have to find a way to separate the washer because the washer needs to stay in next to the bushing as the bolt comes out. Alright, so I held the washer like so, and then while holding it tight, I spun the bolt, and that was enough to get this washer loose, as it should be. So the washer stays in, the bolt would just continue to come out. There we go. Now, as the bolt is sliding out, it will soon leave this area, and these washers, or rather shims, would be free to fall out. If you're not changing the caster angle, You want to remember how your shims are positioned, and you want to preserve that positioning when you reassemble. Okay, you see the bolt leaving now. This part is completely free. Sorry about that, it's just spacing is tight around the camera. All right, we're almost out. Now, when you remove the bolt fully, the wheel hub will try to do two things. First is fall outwards of the vehicle, sort of towards you, and also move backwards. Usually it moves backwards towards the passenger compartment. Now, the falling outwards towards you, you're not really worried about that because you have it supported by a jack anyways. So that's taken care of. But once the bolt is out, the wheel hub will try to kind of swing back. You want to control that movement as well. Okay, here's the last washer, the one that was stuck at the beginning. This is not a shim, this is just a washer at the end of the bushing here. Here's the bolt. The bolt actually looks to be in great condition. Very happy with that. It doesn't seem to be worn out or deteriorated in any way. And now the upper wishbone is free. Let's move it around a bit and get those shims out. There we go. So over here you can probably see how the three shims are actually, oh, there they are. Yeah, there they are. Let me take them out. First, they're kind of stuck together, but there we go. It is three of them. A thick, a thin, and another thick one. So these were at the back. They will stay there. I'm just going to add one extra one to them, and I'll have all four at the back when I reassemble. Again, if you don't want to change your caster, remember the positioning of your shims. Great, where did the other one go? There it is. Okay, there it is. This is the one at the front. So these are the shims. Don't worry about these big washers. That's part of the bushing itself. This is what you care about. And now, let me get this out as well. The upper wishbone is free. It can move around. If you want to have more movement, you need to now drop the hub, the wheel hub, a little bit lower to give yourself some working room here. So I hope you saw how I released a little bit of pressure on the jack, and the whole hub dropped outwards a bit towards me, and now the upper wishbone can move around more freely. The wires are still not stretched, you're okay, but again, you don't want to allow this to drop all the way down. You have to control the movement and the positioning of the hub. So here's how the setup looks so far. The jack is supporting the hub from the bottom. I also added a piece of wood here so that even if the pneumatic mechanism loosens and releases over time, the wood would just hold the jack and not allow it to drop any further. And over here I have this piece of wood sort of wedged between the caliper and the liner. So the wheel hub is now securely in place. The wishbone can be moved around. And we need that because we need to take the old bushings out, and we also may want to do some cleaning and prepping before the new bushings go in. So there's quite a bit of rust on the bushings themselves, and I suspect from them. Keep an eye over here now. Actually, let me zoom in. Look at how much rust is coming out. Yeah, no surprise that there was a lot of squeaking as I was going through bumps. So in this fashion, you can remove the other bushing as well. I won't bore you with filming that, and then we'll come back when it's time to clean. The bushings which I'll be using are the Powerflex Polyurethane Bushings. Now, this product is very different in terms of its shape, structure, and how it goes together compared to the stock bushings. One specific thing about these is that they come with PTFE silicone grease, and that silicone grease has to be used during the installation process. Now, just like with every silicone grease, once applied, it is an absolute magnet for dirt, sand, dirt particles, and so on. So what I would like to do before I start putting the bushings in, I would like to clean the area so that once they are greased up and ready to go into the wishbone, if they end up touching surrounding sort of areas, they don't get covered in little particles of debris, because those particles would then turn almost into sandpaper for the bushings, and over time they would degrade the bushings performance. So I would like the area to be clean before I assemble and put the bushings onto the wishbone. So for that I would use some degreaser, just very briefly here as a quick demo. Degreaser, I would brush, sort of get off the surface dirt and debris. This is just a plastic brush. This is aluminum here where I'm working, so I'm not really scratching it or damaging it in any way. And then I would just use a water bottle and spray wash this off. So I hope you can see the difference here, and I have a container at the bottom to collect the water that's coming down. So I would do this in the whole area with most of the components, and then we'll continue after that. All right, so cleaning is done. I know that it doesn't look like showroom condition, but the important thing is that there is no debris and loose dirt particles all over the place. Everything is clean now. I won't be worried about little pieces of dirt sticking onto the bushings. Now, the one last thing you may want to clean is inside the actual sort of channels where the new bushings would slide in. So cleaning inside there is probably a good idea. What I would use is just a drill with a wire brush. I'll put that inside and spin it around a few times just to make sure that all debris is out from that area, and after that we'll be ready to reinstall the new bushings. Here's what they look like. Both components are identical. It doesn't matter left, right, front, back, and so on. One slides in on this side, the other one slides in on this side. Nice tight fit. Let me just pull them back out. In In the middle, you have this metal cylinder, nice and thick. I'm actually not sure what metal this is, but I hope it's rust resistant. Goes in the middle like this. And this is more or less the bushing assembled inside the wishbone. In addition, once this is in place, on both ends, you would place one of these brand new washers that come in the kit. And only then the fulcrum bolt would go through. So this is in essence the complete bushing for the front of the wishbone in this case, and the same one for the back, and two more for the other side of the vehicle. Now, it is between this inner washer and the subframe where your caster shims would be positioned, either at the front or at the back, depending on where you need them. In my case, I'll be placing the shims at the back. But that's more or less it. Now, one more note. In the package, you will get this little PTFE silicone grease pouch. It looks very little, but it is enough. You don't need to apply much, but there are instructions in terms of how to apply, what to grease, and so on. Follow the instructions when you're reassembling. The other maybe tip here that I could provide is underneath at the bottom, like down here, have something that is very, very clean, so that if you end up dropping a bushing while you're reassembling and it falls on the ground, it doesn't end up in a pile of sand or dust or debris. It would fall onto something clean. You'll be able to pick it up and sort of continue your process. If that bushing that you theoretically drop on the ground, if it gets contaminated and dirty with little particles, you almost have to start from the beginning. You would have to clean it off perfectly and then grease again. The bushings are in and we're ready to reposition the wishbone so that the fulcrum bolt could go back through. Now, you may notice that there's a bit of a gap here. When the bushings are in and the metal cylinder is placed through the middle, the fit is extremely tight, and I wasn't able to compress this fully, but I'm not worried about it, because once the fulcrum bolt goes through and I start tightening, it should be able to easily compress those outer bushings and squeeze them in as needed. So that shouldn't be an issue. Now, let me zoom out a bit. The important thing here is that you essentially need to start lifting the wheel hub with the jack, and as you're lifting it, the bushings will get closer to the subframe where they need to reside. So let me do that there. Now, they're getting closer, but you notice, let me try to zoom in. And sorry about that, I'm working with one hand here. All right, see how they're out of place? Like this one is too far out, that one is too far back. Now this is because the wheel hub itself needs to be manipulated a bit, like so. Okay, and now I'll continue lifting. And now the fit is much, much better. I may need to turn it a bit more this way. But you get the idea. As you move it forward and backward, the angle up here changes, and you want to align it to be perfectly straight for the bolt to go through. Now, don't forget the shims and don't forget the washers. So let's just start doing this together. Let me put some gloves on. Okay, here's the bolt. Now the bolt will come through here. We have washer there, right? So I will start it like so. Now, before the bolt goes through here, I need to have another washer in place. There we go. Now the bolt is through the washer, but it also needs to get through, or rather inside the subframe. There we go. Okay, it's coming through. Did you see it on this side? Okay. So on this end we're good. Now here, before the bolt comes out, I need my shims, all 4 of them. This is how I've decided to change their position to adjust the caster. And after the shims, I need a washer as well. So this would be probably the trickiest bit. I have the 4 shims here. 2 thick ones on the outside, 2 thin ones in the middle, ready to go. And here's one of the new washers that comes with the kit. So those would need to be positioned in this way, placed in the gap there, and the bolt has to go through. Okay. So I've got them squeezed in. Now I need to move them in place. Okay. The big washer is in, but I cannot push the smaller shims in with my fingers. I'll probably need a screwdriver for that. One moment. Okay. I'm just eyeing it here. It looks all right. Oh, yes. It went through. Okay, so it's inside here now. All right, so that was probably the hardest part. I just need to keep pushing it to the end. I may need to turn it here. There we go. Yep, yep. Beautiful. It's out. Now the final washer goes in, and then the nut. Now when I start tightening, the squeezing force will close this gap over here. I think the gap is closing now. Yeah, definitely closing. Okay, now it's getting tight. At this point, I'm going to bring in the torque wrench and torque it to the right spec, which is between 60 to 80 Newton meters. And it's important to torque it now before I have released the hub. The hub is still supported by the jack, and this allows the bolt to turn freely. So when there is no tension on the assembly here, I would like to torque it accurately, and only then release the hub and apply some weight and force over here onto the bolt. So let's do that now. There we go. 80.2. So we're torqued up, everything's in place, shims are in place, washers are in place. I need to reroute the cable from the front, there we go. And at this point, I can release the tension from the jack, let the hub rest, and we're ready to go. Let me take it to the other side as well. Looking pretty over here as well. Everything's done. One thing I want to mention is that when the caster angle changes, you will have a change in your toe angle as well. It's unavoidable. So if you modify the caster in any way, you are indirectly affecting the toe as well. So you, after potentially changing your caster angle, if you don't keep your shims exactly the way they were, if you move them around and you change your caster angle, my recommendation would be go to an alignment shop and check your toe angle again, just to make sure you're still within spec and you know, your wheels are pointed in the right direction and you're not wearing your tires abnormally. All right, I think that's it, folks. This more or less completes the process. If you stuck with me all the way to the end, thank you so much. This was a fun project, not too hard. It took some time, but it wasn't hard to execute. I'm looking forward to getting alignment done again and then taking it for a test drive to see if the squeaking is gone, most importantly. All right, take care, best of luck in your upcoming projects, and I'll see you again in the next videos.